Hello friends, this isn't the video I planned this week, but I had a couple of requests to go deeper into that short I made earlier in the week about our amygdala versus our prefrontal cortex, which part of the brain we are speaking to when we talk with someone or communicate with someone, and which part that brain is doing the talking when we are communicating with someone. Hi friends, my name is Kenton Whitman, and together with my family, we aim to share wilderness skills, mindfulness practices, wild edible plants, family adventures, and skills that break you free from the limits of civilized life. Join us by subscribing to our channel and joining our YouTube family. Alright, so the basic concept I covered last time was this idea that when we talk to somebody, we can just think, oh, I'm just talking with Fred. But when I'm just talking with Fred, we all know how communication goes between human beings. So there's a little trick we can use where instead of just talking with Fred, I realize I'm also talking with Fred's brain. And I ask, which part of his brain am I speaking to? Am I speaking to the prefrontal cortex or the areas of the brain that are associated with rational thinking, with compassion, with sharing ideas, with being in touch with our emotions but not ruled by them? Or am I speaking with Fred's amygdala? That would be the part of his brain that is fear-based, that is reactive. And when I am speaking with someone's amygdala, the conversation usually can't go in places that I might desire it to go. Often when we're communicating with someone, we're trying to convince them of something or show them some evidence or otherwise help them understand something the way that we perceive is the correct way to see it. They're probably trying to do the same thing back. And when we're in that kind of communication, as soon as the person's amygdala is engaged, it's literally useless to continue the conversation in that way. The amygdala cannot see multiple solutions to a problem. It just latches onto one thing and ignores all other evidence. So if you're speaking with someone's amygdala, then this is not the time to try to convince them of something or show them something about an idea that you have. And it's the same thing when we look at what part of our brain we're speaking with. If I'm speaking to someone with my prefrontal cortex, I know I'm going to be listening, I'm going to be rational, I'm going to be engaged. If I'm speaking to someone but I'm in my amygdala, then I'm not going to be my best self. In fact, far from it. I'm going to be very reactive. I'm going to be immersed in my little me, just trying to defend my ideas or myself. The questions people presented are, how do we ID? How do we identify what portion of a person's brain we're speaking with? And how do I identify what part of my brain I'm speaking with? So just as we would learn to identify a tree, a plant, a mushroom, let's learn to identify these brain states. As we go in and we try to identify these brain states, it can be helpful to rename them. And another way to think of these is that my amygdala is the reactive part of my mind. Reaction is when a stimulus comes in and I have an instant reaction. It's usually not a really positive reaction. It's usually a defense-based reaction. My prefrontal cortex, conversely, would be the response-based part of my mind. Response is when an external comes in and I look at it, I assess it, see it from some different angles, and then make a conscious decision about it rather than just reacting. And understanding that we could call this part of our brain the amygdala, the reaction part, the prefrontal cortex, the response part, just that alone gives us some idea of how we can identify these. Because how do we ID reactivity? We know that when someone is reactive, they're going to use these absolutist terms. You always do this. You know what? You never, these always, these nevers, these other words that are absolutist, they signify that the brain is no longer thinking rationally, because there's not a lot of always and nevers in much of anything. What we're probably trying to say is, from my perception, the majority of the time you don't do this, or you do this. But never, always, that means I'm in reaction mode. Reaction mode also has some body language cues. So my body language tenses up. I might have my arms moving, but they're going to be tight and they're going to be tense. I'm probably going to start tensing up through my shoulders and my neck. You're going to see it in my facial features. All kinds of this just centered tension kind of based body language that says, ooh, that person's in reactivity mode. And then there is defensiveness. When we are reactive, we tend to instantly jump in to defend ourselves. So as soon as someone presents an idea that's against ours, boom, we jump in to try to knock it down instead of really listening to it. If someone makes a critique on our personality or something else about us, we jump into defensive mode. So that defensiveness, those are 3 markers to help identify when you're looking at somebody else whether they are in reactive mode. We're going to be looking for that absolutist language. We're going to be looking for tense body language. And we are going to be looking for defensive actions. Now, same thing in ourselves. I can identify when I have gone into my amygdala by watching for those same things inside of myself. In addition, of course, I can feel my inner state. So I can feel that tension. I can feel my brain tightening and narrowing. And that is how we identify that feeling of reactivity in others or ourselves. It's very important to remember that if we're identifying it in other people, that there is no use in saying to somebody, you're being reactive. To tell them they're in their amygdala, or tell them they're in reaction mode, unless you've set up with somebody ahead of time that you're going to help each other identify these states. That's a different game. But if you're just communicating with someone who doesn't know about this, don't tell the reactive mind that it's in reactive mode. That only gets it more reactive. And this leads us out of identifying those states. And how do we transform them? How do we switch from amygdala to prefrontal cortex, from reaction to response, or help somebody else make that switch? Do not underestimate, first of all, the power of the reactive mind to develop momentum. It stays very strong in that reactive mode, and it does not want to get out of it. In a weird way, reactiveness feels good. We feel righteous when we are reactive. Reactivity is usually short term, because biologically, that amygdala, it's really meant to fire up, boom, for a moment's reaction to something, and the saber-tooth jumps out, and we have a fight, or I run away, probably not gonna outrun it. So, and then encounter's over, those chemicals clear out, and I can be back to my normal aware self. Our ancestors, I propose, probably were not stressed like us. In order to survive in nature, especially back when we had megafauna and immense predators and we didn't have our guns or anything else, we had to be hyper aware. We had to be just, and I don't mean hyper aware as in hyper vigilant, but I mean aware in this openness that comes when we have a calm awareness. That calm awareness is much more aware than that hyper vigilance, which just spotlights everywhere. The calm awareness, it's aware of sounds all around me. It's aware of the visual, my full visual field. And those of you who've explored this know that when you become more aware like that, it's calming. It's relaxing, it's opening, it's listening. It's not tense. So here we would be, again, my proposal, who knows if it's right or not, we would be in this open, aware state and then jump into the amygdala for just a moment and out. But nowadays, a lot of people are in their amygdala, sometimes almost 24/7. This is what we call chronic stress. So that amygdala is just constantly firing. Turn on the evening news and it's going to feed you a constant diet of fear. It's basically turning on the amygdala again and again. Alert, this giant emergency is happening, this giant emergency, this giant emergency. The world's always full of emergencies. So those are always there. If we go out and we look at a source that is collecting all those emergencies and then putting them into our face and trying to make them as dramatic as they can, then we are teaching our amygdala to be on all the time, always in a state of fear. That's the reality for a lot of people. So when we speak to someone, remember that the modern human is often kind of lodged in their amygdala. Now, understanding a little bit of brain chemistry can help us to get some people out of their amygdala. And certainly, if you're on a mindfulness quest yourself, to get yourself out of your amygdala and into your more response-based mind. And these are two things that have been termed by some authors, researchers, the 6-second rule and the 90-second rule. Remember, when we hear that word rule, it's really no such thing, especially in biological systems. Biological systems, that's you and me, are extremely complex things. So don't get stuck on the 6 seconds or the 90 seconds. I'm still going to use this concept because basically what happens in our brain is when something comes in and it should be processed by more of a holistic brain thing, but it hits that amygdala. So it's something that triggers me. Remember, people will have a lot of triggers where a certain word or a certain conversation has launched them into their amygdala yesterday. If you bring up that conversation again, especially if you use similar language, kind of similar setting, whatever it is, that's going to click that on again and send them, trigger it, send them right back into the amygdala. So if we're trying to get somebody out, we have to be aware of those triggers they might have. But for a brain that is not, doesn't have chemical imbalances of some kind, and that's the reality for a lot of us, and isn't too steeped in a diet of fear so that their amygdala is chronically on, then for those people, when something comes in that triggers a fear or defensiveness, it spurts out some chemicals that basically say, prefrontal cortex, response brain, shut down. We don't need you. This is an emergency. If we can learn to see that in somebody else, that sudden tension and defensiveness, or we can learn to feel it in ourselves, the chemicals that create that only have a lifespan of about 6 seconds, and then they dissipate out. If we can recognize what our brain is feeling, recognize that in somebody else, and shift away out of whatever was triggering this response for about 10 seconds, a little bit past that 6 seconds, let's go to 10, then the brain chemicals essentially get a chance to reset. Doesn't mean you can jump in with the same trigger again. It'll launch the same trigger. But it means, now I can approach from a different angle. So if I wanted to talk to somebody about something that's affecting my life that they do, and I go into it, boom, and I see the defensiveness, if I can just stop, pause, somehow get their mind to think about something else, even say, wait a second, that was a completely wrong tack. And do you remember yesterday when we were walking and we saw that eagle? And I just wanted to share that memory with you of that eagle that we saw and how beautiful that made me feel and made you feel, and the smile that we shared. Now I've taken 10, 12 seconds and I've switched the direction of their mind. Those brain chemicals will clear out. Now I can approach that situation maybe more wisely, again, from a different angle perhaps. If we can listen, if we can really come into our responsive mind, we can start to pull theirs out, because reactivity loves nothing more than reactivity in return. It has a lot of trouble existing in a context that includes responsiveness. So if you want to help somebody out of their amygdala into their prefrontal cortex, what you do is you be responsive. One of the best ways to do that is validation. I spoke about this in the Peaceful Warrior video, so I'm not going to go hugely in depth again. But the concept here is to remember that no feeling is wrong. Whatever somebody's feeling is what they're feeling. It's okay. Actions that come out of those feelings, that's a different thing. But when somebody's feeling, if you can just accept their feelings, voice to them that you hear them, that you understand where they're coming from, you don't have to agree with them. Just listen, validate, and what that does is it starts to take the wind out of the sail of their reactivity. So this validation, which we could probably equally call, for a large part, listening, is almost magical in its ability to help somebody shift out. And it's really probably the best technique that we have, at least that I know of. If someone's exceptionally strong and they're very mindful and they're going into reactivity, you might be able to call them out on it and pull them out of it. But for most people, it's not going to work. Use validation. Use listening. When you've created a bond with somebody again, when they no longer feel threatened, and their brain has had some time to clear some chemicals, then you can re-engage. Myself, as soon as I feel that trigger response, I can stop. I can stop. I can count to 10, or I can think about something else for 10 seconds. Or if I'm developing my focus and concentration, I can concentrate on a dot on the wall for 10 seconds. Whatever it is that's going to clear that out of my mind. If someone is yelling at you, you might not be able to just zone out like that, but often you can let their words flow over you. Look at the color of their eyes. And you're still looking into their eyes, seem to be giving them your full attention, but what you're really doing is performing a self-rescue, because you, boom, got launched into your amygdala, and you're just taking a moment to get out of it, to clear those brain chemicals, and give yourself another chance to approach the situation with a new perspective from another angle. That's the 6-second rule. But after that 6 seconds, usually what happens is then we continue the thoughts that have triggered us. And so we continue a thought process, and the thought process triggers more chemical release. And now we're dumping adrenaline and cortisol and other longer lasting chemicals. But I did a video on this quite a while back. Even these chemicals don't last all that long. They have about a 90-second shelf life. So if you notice that, wow, now I'm really into that place where it feels good to stay reactive, where I want to stay reactive, that's a good sign that I am now in that 90-second window. And if I can stop for 90 seconds, most of those brain chemicals will have cleared. And again, I can start from a new perspective, a new angle. This is a longer time period that I need to often in a conversation say, you know what, I'm so sorry, I'm just not in the proper frame of mind. Give me 2 minutes to calm myself down. And then go and use a distraction. Maybe it's a funny cat video. Maybe it's meditation, watching your breath. Anything you can do to get yourself out of that mind cycle for 90 seconds, maybe just a little bit more than that. And you will find that those chemicals are cleared. And now you have, It's not automatically now that you're going to go to the prefrontal cortex or to your response mode, but now you have the choice again. You're not launched into that momentum that the reactive mind has. It's pretty amazing how just understanding how those brain chemicals work can allow us to get out. And especially with the 90 seconds, that's a fairly long time when you're worked up to try to distract your mind. And because that reactiveness has so much momentum, I can stop and I go, okay, I'm going to breathe deep. I'm still mad. Well, I only spent about 8 seconds. Those chemicals are still fully functioning in my brain and just going. And remember that during that 90 seconds, if I don't successfully distract myself, if it maybe second 45 or 85, I think about the thing again and I reinitiate that trigger, I start another 90-second cycle. That's usually what's happening when these things go on and we're angry for hours or days. So our mind keeps triggering it over and over and thinking about that person and how bad they are and what they did to me and blah, 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 blah. It can go on and on and on. It can become sometimes kind of low-level chronic in the background where I have a resentment that's built up towards somebody. And that just, every time I think of them, I get a little spurt of those chemicals that last 90 seconds. And I'm thrown into that again. So much of this is our brain building pathways. And we have to consciously build new ones, or we'll just be at the mercy of whatever usually our little me, our amygdala wants to do. So really important along our journey of rewilding and mindfulness that we are paying close attention to how our mind operates, what we're feeling and experiencing, and being able to consciously shift our mind's direction. That kind of turned into a long tutorial on how to understand this, but this is really, these should be basic life skills. These are, again, probably not things that we would have needed in the distant past because our mind naturally would have operated like this. But today, we definitely need to know about these things, or whatever's going on in our personal dramatic life, in the world, it's going to overwhelm us. It's just going to, there's plenty to be stressed about right now. And you know what? In general, there always is, if I just tune into the news. So be as informed as you like, but remember, we have more conscious control than we've been taught over how our mind operates. And if we take the time to train our mind, to teach it some of maybe these natural ways of functioning again, maybe cut down some of the diet of fear that we're intaking, and just be here, present with the world around us. The world might end tomorrow. Might go on for 1 million more years. Who knows? But you do have this moment, this right now. The connection with the people you're with. Commenting here and connecting with me. Going out into nature, tasting the food that you're eating. Breathing this breath that you're breathing. That's it. That is the ultimate of life. That's winning, right? It's not getting $10 million or this or that or that. You can taste the food you're eating. You are experiencing more of life than you will ever experience with any amount of money at the bank, any amount of Facebook likes, any amount of subscribers. Perspective about what's really vital, what's really important. So my friends, love to you all. Thank you so much for watching. Leave in the comments any techniques you have for recognizing when somebody else or yourself is in a reactive mind, and how do you help others or help yourself to make the switch from reactive mind to responsive mind.